All right, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Um, it's the May 2021 OpenZFS leadership meeting. Have a bunch of things on the topic for today. I'm going to kick it off with new maintainers. I sent an email about this, so you may have seen it. But as you guys probably know, Brian Bellendorf has been doing like almost all of the work of maintaining the PRs and issues in OpenZFS for the past, I don't know, close to a decade now. And as the project's grown, we have more and more volume of contributions, which is great. But it's quite a workload for one person to do. So we've recruited a few new maintainers, in addition to myself, who I have not done a lot of that work recently. But we have three new folks, Tony Wynn, Mark Mabey, and John Kennedy, who have been working on ZFS for quite some time, and they're going to be helping us out by ushering the PRs through the review process, helping to get reviewers, nag reviewers, make sure that everybody knows kind of what the next steps are to get pull requests integrated, and give feedback when pull requests are not able to be integrated, and then actually doing the integration. So I see a few of you on here, Mark and Tony. Welcome. In the email, I outlined the different areas. So it's not like round robin. It's kind of areas of the code base that are assigned to each maintainer. So you'll see like Mark is responsible for all of the core generic non-shared kernel code. And then Tony has most of the like platform specific and other kernel code, as well as documentation and some of the other userland commands. And John has the test suite and a couple of the kind of core userland components, libzfs, and its consumers like the zpool and zfs commands, and libzpool and its consumers like ztest and zdb, as well as developer tools like the make files, packaging, GitHub workflows, that kind of stuff. So Brian and I and Tony Hutter will continue on as maintainers. Hopefully Brian will be able to remain in kind of a catch-all consulting role. And I will probably continue on like helping out other folks, but not owning areas myself. And Tony Hutter will continue managing the backports and doing the backports, as well as the Zed, the event daemon. Cool. So thanks to our three new volunteers. Hopefully you will find it rewarding to contribute to the community in this way. And thanks for your efforts. So you probably saw a few of those integrations happen, I think just yesterday, starting. But look out, the last thing I should mention is that we're using the assignee of each PR to indicate which maintainer is responsible for it. So shortly after you open the PR, you should see that somebody, one of the maintainers was assigned to it, and they're kind of your point of contact. If you're like, why is my pull request not getting integrated? Or what do I need to do next? How do I find people to review this? The assigned code reviewer there in GitHub is a person that you should ask those questions of. Cool. All right, so next on the agenda, we have a few things about properties. I'm not sure who wanted to talk about
that was me. It was kind of leftover from our discussion last month with, for example, with the new S3 vdev type, how you would set those vdev properties at create time and what the interface for that would look like. I don't really have a concrete proposal, but I know, we ran out of time last month to talk about it, so I just added it to the agenda a couple of weeks
Yeah,
ago and haven't thought about it since.
yeah, a concrete thing that would apply to today would be like a shift, for example, where, I mean, maybe this is not a good idea, but like the A shift is specific to each vdev. It may not be a good idea to have different ones for different,
Mhm.
normal class vdevs, but you can do it. And right now you have the like -O A shift equals whatever, and that applies to at least all the normal class ones. I don't know if it applies to other ones.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of how you were doing it for the S3 properties as well, right?
Yeah, with just pool properties. So it might be helpful to think about like how would you want to create a pool or add vdevs while specifying the A shift per vdev.
Right.
It
Or
does seem a little tricky in terms of like how you would want to parse the command line. It would be much easier if like you had to add vdevs one at a time. If there was a like zpool create that created some like empty vdev, and then you would like add each vdev, sorry, an empty pool with no vdevs, and then afterwards like add one vdev at a time.
Mhm.
But that's not how it works today. I guess we could say that if you want to use this new vdev properties, then we introduce a way to do that.
Yeah, because doing something where it's like the vdev colon or some other separator and then the comma separated list of properties, it gets pretty ugly pretty fast, I think.
Yeah,
it's
I
nasty
agree.
syntax.
Especially when you have like you have to handle both like properties that are set on a top level vdev versus ones that are on leafs.
Yep.
And you might have both or neither. You might have one vdev which is both a top level and a leaf. So that seems pretty tricky. So I mean, maybe
Yeah.
maybe
you want
go ahead.
as I said, your one at a time idea is reasonable for top levels, right? So you can add top levels one at a time. But obviously for leaf vdevs, it's problematic.
That's true. At least for leaf vdevs, it would be clear. Well, I guess maybe in all cases, like you could design a parser where it would be clear which vdev you're applying the property to. Where it's like prop equals value, and then that applies to the next thing that's parsed or whatever. It would just probably be kind of ugly.
So is there, you gave the example of A shift, but is there a need right now for this capability anywhere that anybody has that they can come up with?
I think it'll mostly be when the actual vdev property stuff lands, and you can start having properties specific to a vdev other than
Right.
A shift, which is not really a property at the moment.
Right.
Then it'll become more valuable to be able to set those ahead of time. Like
Agreed.
some of them, right now, most of the properties that the vdev property stuff is adding are read-only or whatever, or would be able to be set after without a disadvantage. But
right.
At some point, you could see it being different. Like even, I don't know if it makes sense, but controlling the number of metaslabs or the size of the metaslabs or something, or anything that's create time only like that.
Yeah, that's actually interesting. That's an interesting one. Yeah, I was just wondering if we, kick the can down the road a little bit by saying, all right, we don't have to worry about it until we see some.
Yes, I think we can do that. I think we can do that, but I just wondering if if anybody comes up with a brilliant idea, please do put it on the mailing list or something.
Yeah, I think that we can definitely integrate what you have in the PR now as far as the interface without this.
I think outside of like a comment and one or two other properties, there's not much that you set other than making up your own user properties, and those can be done after the fact with just a zpool set or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
That's all I have for that one.
All right, cool. Then the next one is, I assume this is also you getting zpool status via pool properties like scrub progress and other stuff.
Yeah. So some of the stuff you can get with what's in the ZPL or the vdev properties PR now. You can get the counters, like the checksum errors and read and write errors and that kind of thing. Most of those counters you can get as properties, but getting just the pool status other than online or degraded is one of the properties of the pool, but that the scan progress or just there's the action line if something is wrong and a bunch of other ones. There's no way to extract those other than parsing the human readable ZPool status. I looked at doing it, but a lot of the logic for it all lives in the user space side, which is a little weird to do with properties. Like I think for some of them, we can pass the enum or whatever value as the property, and then libzfs can convert that into the string. But for some of them, it looks a little harder to do. Just all the text comes from either the zpool command or libzfs, not from the other side of ZFS.
Yeah, I think this is probably something that you could approach incrementally. Like, the state is clearly like an enum, which could just be a number or a string.
But yeah, like I think specifically action, errata, and I think scan and 1, 2 others are the ones that are a bit hairier.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like action especially is like complicated. But scan and those related ones, I think could probably be made machine parsable pretty straightforwardly. I mean, they are basically all those numbers are just coming up from the kernel. And like, I wouldn't bother with, say, the estimate, but just, which is calculated in Userland, but being able to report like, there is a scan in progress. And like, this is how much it's done, and this is how much it has to do.
Yeah.
And this is the time that it was started.
So as part of the telemetry stuff for Influx or ZPool InfluxDB, we pull those numbers out, for a telemetry. So you might go take a look at how I did it over there.
Right.
Okay.
But it's warning, it's not easy to make it backward compatible.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the point of
It's not a stable
making this a real property. Is that then
yeah,
we
so
would
if you want to
maintain
make
that
it
backwards
a
compatible.
property, I think it's a good idea. And then you can carry forward as a property that's more or less stable.
Yep.
Or more stable, not less stable.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it's a good idea. I think that we can definitely approach it incrementally, and I look forward to your PR, Alan.
Yeah. See if I can find another round to it under a couch cushion or something. Get around to it someday.
Cool. The next thing was about
kind of related
type.
to vdev properties and this idea of adding more properties is, if we add a very large number of properties, does it make sense to have some new type that's somewhere between hidden and normal, that's not displayed by default when you do get all, but is there if you go to look for it or something, for the ones that are not meant to be looked at by a human necessarily?
I think that get all is already extremely verbose.
Yeah.
And not that it's clearly not useful programmatically. And so I would say like pile on.
Okay.
And to not worry about that too much. And then, I think that we should kind of separately address the problem of like having some user-friendly, easy to read output that's like, hey, tell me about this thing. And which, might include some properties, but not all of them. Like we could address
kind of like
that as,
I think there's a special meta property called space for ZFS list or whatever that just includes the subset of properties.
Right, to come up with some aliases like that that are for different sections, perhaps.
Yeah, come up with some aliases like that, or come up with some new subcommand that's like ZFS info dataset, and then it's like a full screen text display of various stuff about it. I'm just making stuff up, but like I would solve that problem separately than making like get all be pretty, because it's
Right.
clearly not
Yeah.
as it stands today.
Okay, makes sense.
Cool. So Mayank, are you here to talk about Userland ZFS?
Yes.
Great. Did I pronounce your name correctly? How do you pronounce your name?
Yes. Had Mayank.
Mayank. Okay.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Apologies. Yeah, I'd love to hear about Userland ZFS and kind of where you're at with the process and what you like. What problem this solved for you, and how you see integrating with the rest of the ecosystem.
Yeah. So in OpenBS, we have one storage engine, CStore. So basically, initially we were planning to use ZFS, but it is like the being in the kernel. So it is like if it gets panicked, then it will crash the whole system, and it will take time to reboot and start again. And actually, we were planning to use it in Kubernetes, so where this delay should be very less. So then we think of it porting to the user space, basically running in user space. And to run it, actually, we need to move this kernel module into user space. So to do that, actually, we already have this JTest which runs in user space. So we disable this file system, ZFS file system, and exported this ZFS volume through the iSCSI. So that iSCSI part we have written, and we have also added support for the replication and the rebuilding. So with that, actually, we can run this multiple ZFS process in user space, which provides the replication and also the rebuilding if any replica gets out, or if you want to add any new replica. So that way it adds support for the multi-tenancy environment.
Cool. So you mentioned that it exports over iSCSI. Is that part
Yes,
of
so
what iSCSI server does that use, and how does that work?
yeah, so basically we have exported few APIs to read and write the data directly to the ZFS volume. So those APIs are being accessed by the iSCSI. So that one iSCSI also we have written, we have actually modified it to send the IOs to the UGFS process.
Okay.
So basically it is sending
Is that like
go
a
ahead.
fully custom iSCSI server, or is that based on some other iSCSI server work?
No, it is based on some other iSCSI service, I think, but we have added this replication and rebuilding module into that iSCSI, which provides basically which access the APIs exported from the ZFS.
Cool.
So that is on the actually TCP.
I mean, this sounds really cool. I think that obviously, like in the future, it would be great if something like this could export NFS as well, and potentially integrate with like local file systems via Fuse or one of the higher performing variants of that kind of idea. So I guess a couple of questions I had were like, do you have any performance measurements like with this iSCSI server compared to ZFS with the in-kernel ZFS with the in-kernel iSCSI server?
Yes, actually I will add that
Cool.
into this pull request.
Yeah, I think that would, I think that people probably have a opinion on they probably have a preconceived notion on the performance of userland file systems and ZFS due to experience with Fuse. And if we can help to dispel that, I mean, if it is faster, then that would definitely be helpful to inform people that, hey, this is not just like a toy. It can be used for production and get performance that's in the same ballpark as the in-kernel iSCSI server. That would be that would really be helpful in terms of showing that this is useful and valuable. Aside from that, I guess, what's the status? Like, I saw you open the pull request. It's like not huge. It's only about a little more than 1,000 lines of code. Is this ready for review? Is this like the whole thing, or are we waiting for additional changes that you're planning to make?
Yeah, so actually initially I have added only few ioctl, mainly I think create and the list. So we are already supporting other ioctl also, basically creating the snapshot and send ZFS send receive. So at this stage, we are checking like if we want to add this in upstream, then we can work on other ioctl also. Because
Yeah.
since this code is completely tightly coupled with our separate library which support this replication and rebuilding, so we need to refactor that code also.
Cool. And you mentioned that there's changes required to the Userland iSCSI server. Have you engaged with whatever the community is that maintains that to see, if they would accept those changes upstream? Because that's kind of, for folks who are not, you using it in your product, it would be nice if there was like we need some way to actually use this. Otherwise, it's kind of similar to ztest or ZDB in that it's interesting for development purposes or for playing around with, but you kind of need to hook it up with something to be able to actually consume that in production or testing environments.
So iSCSI part, actually, I think we haven't checked yet, but yeah,
Okay.
that's a good idea.
Yeah, hopefully they use GitHub as well, and you can kind of link the, point each pull request at the other one, so that we can keep track of how that's doing as well. Cool. So it sounds like the next step that you are looking for is code reviewers. Is that right?
Yes.
Right. So Mark was assigned as the maintainer for this. So there's a lot of kernel stuff here.
Yeah.
I don't know Mark, if you have any thoughts on code reviewers. If not, then we can, I guess, work together to try and find folks.
Yeah, I think right now it's got a few code reviewers requested for it, but
I think those are just the suggestions that come up automatically.
okay, you're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So they haven't actually like been pinged or volunteered.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think we should probably talk about it and take a look at the code and see what areas this falls into and who might be the best person to take a look at it.
Yeah. I mean, I'd be happy to take a look at it to some degree, at least.
Yeah. Obviously, you've looked at it slightly because you have some comments in here, but
yeah.
Yeah, I could probably take a look at it as well because I had played around with that in the past.
okay. I think Don, are you on already? Yeah, you're already on there as a request, as a suggestion. So.
All right, cool. I'll click Don. I'll add myself. And yeah, I mean, I think that I would love to see this idea of Userland ZFS become more useful for more use cases. I'm also interested in portability of the Userland ZFS. Like, I'm assuming that you're just running this on Linux, but it would be really cool if we could, if we're only using like POSIX interfaces, then in theory, it'll work on any Unix, which would be really cool. I'm not sure if that's true of even like the libspl stuff today, but it should at least be a lot easier to port than the kernel part. Cool. Were there other things that you wanted to discuss about this?
That was also the rest of the the octal I will edit in like maybe separate PR or in this PR.
You're talking about like handling more actals?
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
as far as whether that should be part of this PR versus opening a new PR that like kind of adds on to it.
Yeah.
I think we probably need to decide like what's the minimum amount of functionality here to get it integrated. If we decide, yeah, we do want to have more actals, then it would need to be part of this PR. I think we need to figure out like it sounds like integrating it with the iSCSI server. I mean, the iSCSI server is not something that's part of our code base, obviously. So we need to figure out like what that is, how universal it is, or would we integrate this and kind of be like, if you want to use this, you have to be using this other software component, or would we be saying that this is useful on its own, and we add at least some kind of like little driver utilities that would let you, access it in some like potentially hacky way.
I think one thing we talked about a couple years ago, me, you, and I think Paul Doedek, was being able to do send receives in user space for even just for the to improve the send receive tests, and that might be a relatively straightforward thing and something that wouldn't be too complicated for the user space one, because it's mostly just doing the ZFS bits and reading or writing to a file descriptor.
Yeah, that's that might be a good minimum functionality. So basically, like if you could do everything that you can with zpool and ZFS commands, but there's no like access to the data when it's initially integrated.
Yeah. So as of now, we are just exposing the API through the TCP. So if the changes are in iSCSI or NFS, then we can access it. But yeah, we need to have some code there.
Yeah. Okay. So like you have your own protocol for reading and writing zvols that the
Yes.
iSCSI server talks to, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So then, I mean, if that's going to be integrated, then we would need some way of testing that,
Yes.
either with a dependency on this external iSCSI server or with, some kind of test programs that would talk the protocol that you've invented.
Yes. So we have actually written some dummy client, which basically like send this protocol, send this opcode, or read write snapshot. So that's where we are testing it.
Cool. Yeah, that would be great. I mean, I think that it probably wouldn't be too hard to actually hook that up with there's Seraphim, you might remember what the name of this thing is, but on Linux, there's something like, there's one of them is called Buse, B-U-S-E, that's like block driver in user space. It lets you basically implement like a volume that shows up in /dev, but it's handled by a user space process. So like it probably wouldn't be that hard to get that wired up to you know, a client for your Userland ZFS.
One other throw in, there's also QEMU NBD, I think. That's another protocol that is basically allowing the kernel speaks a protocol to a user space daemon. And I think it's fairly popular in other systems.
Cool. And I think that there's also like a higher performant version of the BUSE driver that I forget the name of. But we can probably Google it and find out. Cool. All right, so it sounds like next steps we need to figure out kind of on the you know, maintainer side, we need to figure out like what's the minimum functionality that we want here to integrate it. We need reviewers to review what the code that's already posted. And then we want to get just a little bit more info from you about like how we can test this and potentially hooking it up with you know, with in kernel like block device driver mechanism. Cool. Anything else on this subject?
I'm not convinced you need a in-kernel block device driver at all. I mean, since it's all in userland, it's just a matter of, you know, opening. And the iSCSI target they're using is also userland. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Mike, it's written in Go and runs in a container. So it should be nicely portable as well.
Yeah, I think the question is just like, if that's the only way to get at the data is via this, you know, third-party iSCSI server, then it makes it a little hard for us to test. Like, I would want to kind of know more about that other piece of software.
It's not that sophisticated though, so it's not too hard.
All right.
But yeah, I think I'm happy to see this come in. So it'll be very useful for, especially for containerized people.
Yeah, I agree. My impression was that like iSCSI servers are one of those things that sounds simple, like you're just, you know, reading and writing blocks, but in reality is hellaciously complicated.
Yeah, it's a complex protocol.
Yeah.
Overly complicated.
So, you know, at least for testing purposes on Linux, it might only be like a couple hundred lines of code to get to hook it up with the existing like BUSE driver that's in the kernel already, to be able to make that available in /dev, and then that enables a lot of testing, as well as like potentially real use cases as well. Cool. What else? What other comments do folks have about this?
One thing I came across when I was playing around with this before was like, what do you do for tunables and like case stats and things like that? ProcFS. How do you mimic ProcFS in userland?
Yeah, actually, we're not doing that. We have disabled that part.
Yeah, I think that to make this like a first class, you know, like another, basically we're talking about making this another platform that is another OpenZFS platform, right? In addition to Linux and FreeBSD, I think we would want to see kind of similar, at least a plan for getting to similar level of functionality, including like support for tunables and observability. Like, for example, well, I guess things like a lot of that stuff is just through ioctls. So as long as you implement all the ioctls, then things like ZPL zfull iostat use the ioctls, so that might be sufficient. But there's stuff like the debug message stuff, for example, like that is really important for debugability and diagnosability. So having some way to get that the ZFS debug messages would be, I think, important.
Yeah.
And modifying the tunables is probably also falls into that category.
Yeah.
By the way, there is a very rudimentary way to set tunables in userland that I think ZDB or Ztest has like a -o, and then it basically like it uses like the runtime linker to look up the symbol with that name, and then sets it. So it's like very janky, but it's kind of analogous to what we have on had on Solaris, which is like you can use the debugger to poke values into global variables. So, you know, at a minimum, something like that might be sufficient.
While working on this, I think we should also try to keep in mind like how we can build up this functionality to something like eventually maybe a full fuse file system or that kind of thing, just to, as we go, lay the groundwork we might need for that.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I realize that we're, you know, like we're asking for some stuff that you haven't implemented. I think some of that is probably pretty straightforward to do, but we may, you know, I think there's probably some excitement about this from some quarters, at least from me, for sure. And so maybe we can recruit some people, you know, additional people to help out on implementing some of this. So I guess if people are interested, then you know, let's coordinate on the PR, and we can work on kind of enumerating these things that are still to do or to implement. And then if other folks are interested, it would be super helpful if people want to pick those up. Okay. Other questions or comments? All right. So next, Alec, you want to talk about the corrective ZFS receive.
Yes, I mentioned it at the last leadership meeting, and I've been trying to drum up some interest in reviewing this since then. And we figured out the problem with the FreeBSD test that was failing, so it's ready for review again. So I'm just trying to get some reviewers, and maybe in light of the stuff you announced in the beginning of this call, we can figure out who should be the assignee to this and the point of contact that I should be bugging.
Yeah, I only set the assignee on things that had been submitted this year, this calendar year, which I'm not, yours may not have fallen into that.
Yep.
But I think Mark would be the person.
Yeah, probably.
There's substantial kernel components here. I'm just looking it up. Looking up the PR. Cool. Yeah, wow, 2019. I'm going to link it to it in the meeting doc. And I will set Mark as the assignee. Cool.
Great.
Looks like several people have commented on that already. So Mark, get your reminder emails ready to send to those folks.
Oh yeah.
Cool. And then looks like the last thing that we have on the agenda is the Blake 3 checksum from Tino. I'm not sure. Are you on here?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Thanks.
Yes, I just wanted to say sorry. I didn't have the time to in the last 4 weeks for doing some more input on this side. But the next 4 weeks I will work on it.
Cool. Thanks. We'll put you on the agenda for a status update for the next one, or we'll look for your PR, even better. Cool. That's all the things that we had on the agenda. I will mention one more thing, which is there's a FreeBSD developer summit, which is going to be in 2 weeks, June 9th through 11th. It's online. I think it's on Zoom, and it's free to attend. And I'm going to be giving a talk on Friday the 11th, about RAID Z expansion. Hopefully featuring at least announcements that might be interesting to developers, if not end users, of RAID Z expansion. Hoping to have the final PR out by then. I don't know, Alan or anyone else from the FreeBSD community, if you wanted to add anything to add to that, if there's anything else that might be of interest to OpenZFS folks. All right. I'll take that as a no. Cool. Well,
Looking
that's
through it, I don't think so. There's one talk on Thursday about a kind of recorder for our storage subsystem CAM that, not really ZFS, but if you're into storage and finding out what happened to your storage or whatever, that might be interesting. And then the continuous integration brainstorming and planning might be of interest to some people, figuring out how to improve FreeBSD's integration with OpenZFS CI and so on.
cool. All right.
I
Well,
guess the other one, if people were interested in the things like IOU ring and a bunch of things like that, the 14 planning session might have discussions of a bunch of things like that, like newer APIs. And I think there's some hole punching stuff that's in progress and things of that nature.
cool. Okay, well, that's the end of the scheduled agenda. What other questions or comments do folks have, or things that they want to solicit reviews or other work on?
I think next week we'll post the PR for the first cut of being able to use ZFS inside of user namespaces and Ubuntu LXD containers. So you can actually delegate a data set into a container so they can only use that data set and they can use it as a non-root user, basically.
Cool.
And basically provide an analog of jails or zones, but for Linux containers. And so we'll definitely be interested in testers and reviewers for that.
Cool.
And I just reached out to Mark, but if anybody, we're also looking to finish reviewing and land the forced export stuff. I think we have the last failing test sorted finally. And that will be handy. I've encountered a couple of people in chat over the last couple of months who would have benefited from being able to, force export the pool that was on the USB stick that the cat stole or whatever. Right. Things of that nature.
So Max probably signed that one to me as well. 11082.
Can you, I think you should be able to do that. No?
I don't think any system objects to you giving yourself more work.
Yeah. You should be able to, like next to assignee is a little gear. If you click that, you should be able to assign yourself, I think.
Yep, that seemed to work.
Cool.
All right.
So currently we have the work in progress label on that. Is that no longer accurate?
Yeah,
as far as you know, the work is done and we need
work
reviewers.
is done. Yes.
All right,
yes.
I'll change the label as well.
Cool. And again, it looks like a few people, myself included, have already given feedback. So I expect we're going to get pinged. That's what we get for having opinions. That's fair, you know. Cool. Other questions, comments? Cool. Well, I suspect it must be summer now because like the view out of Jorgen's window looks almost the same as mine, which is like it's not, the sun isn't rising. It looks like it's daytime there. It's also daytime here. I'm sure it's like still really early in the morning, but
yeah, it just came up above the building, so it started getting warm.
nice. Cool. Well, the next meeting, we probably will not see your sunny window because the next meeting I think is the earlier time.
Yeah, that's a little bit too early. It's at 3 a.m. or something. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next meeting will be June 22nd, and the earlier time 9 a.m. Pacific.
Actually, while I'm here, since we've been working fairly hard on the Mac version, and we had to repush the PR again because we deforked, and we're at the stage where we're pretty happy with it. It you know, pretends to work, even on the M1, which is quite surprising.
Wow.
So now we're kind of, you know, getting the inertia to push it through. We're hoping to be able to push it through anyway. So if it's not too horrendous.
That's great. I'm super impressed.
Oh.
What did we figure out as far as automated testing for this?
We run the ZFS tester thing that you guys do. We're only up to 71% or so pass rate, but we're getting there. There's a lot of fiddly things with the tester because it, yeah.
I guess I mean in terms of the test infrastructure, like, you know, we want, just like we did with FreeBSD, we want to run those tests automatically on macOS so that like when I'm developing stuff on Linux, I don't accidentally break OS X.
Yep.
Do we have like hardware or like some cloud thing that's going to serve up some?
Don't know
OS X
what
machines?
Brian prefers, but we've been using AppVeyor, which has been okay. It has a 90-minute limit, which is obviously not good enough for a full test run. But I believe Amazon has Mac.
Yeah, Amazon has Macs as well.
Yeah.
No.
I believe GitHub does too as part of their workflows now. Can you request those? I think part of their actions you can request.
Yeah, could be. The only concern is that disabling SIP, you know, the security protection thing, or finding a way of code signing it before you load it, which I'm not sure you want to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like that's, you know, maybe one of the remaining infrastructural challenges that we'll want to figure out.
Yeah. No, we obviously wanted to have automatic testing so that to stop you guys from breaking it, but yeah. you shouldn't have to run it as well. So yeah.
Yeah, and you know, we would like to have that, like, if that's, you know, cloud servers or whatever, like, you know, the project should be, the OpenZFS project should be, you know, running and paying for those rather than it coming out of your pocket or, you know,
right.
OpenZFS, you know, OS X.
I hear you loud and clear. Bill you like crazy. Yep.
I know Macs are expensive, but I'm hoping they're not that expensive.
Yeah.
Cool. All right.
One other thing was somebody found a problem with the Z standard, the way the kind of little header we store is stored on big endian, so Spark and PowerPC. Did anybody get a chance to look at that yet? I'm just recalling it now.
I did not. Was there a PR for that?
I thought so.
There is a PR. I have it.
Okay.
I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, Alan.
Yeah, the user pinged me on IRC and I was like, oh, yeah, that might be an issue. I think it was the way we,
Yeah, the byte
I
swapping
forget
wasn't
which of
quite
the,
right.
yeah, the layout of the structure we used to store the version of Z standard and the level together in one 32-bit number gets messed up because of the endianness.
So
and I
I'm
haven't looked at
guessing,
the solution yet either.
yeah, I'm guessing that we're gonna probably choose to, if we have to, just break big endian Z standard. Is that like make it read and write stuff using the way that we're doing it on little endian?
Yeah, I
Or maybe that's
think
premature.
in the
Maybe we just
end
need
it
to look at the code.
came down to changing this, the way we do the struct, and just, I think the right thing to do probably is just, instead of what the if defs they have here, is just make a macro that decodes it properly and use that for accessing it instead of the struct we had been using, because the struct is the wrong way around on the opposite endian. But yeah, I think we should be able to just make it always be the way it is now and not, like, we did the right thing and wrote it to the disk forced to be in big endian. It's just when we're reading
Okay.
it back and loading it into the struct on big endian, it ends up backwards.
I see. All right. So so we don't have to change the on-disk format at all.
I don't think so.
All right. Well, that's nice.
Yes. You know, we designed it to specifically not to have this problem, and then didn't realize that a later change to make the code cleaner ended up introducing the problem. I'm not sure why the test that decodes that didn't catch that on the, we have a PowerPC thing in the tests that runs the test, right?
You have a PowerPC thing, but it only compiles. It doesn't actually run any of the tests.
So the, yeah, because I wrote a ZDB test specifically to decode the header and make sure the version in the level came back correctly. But we don't seem to have any good big endian stuff that we run the test suite on.
Yeah, I'm just taking a quick look at the, well, I'll give the feedback on the PR. It looks like there's some introducing code that's already there for like byte swapping and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So we can simplify that, but it'd be good to have this fixed. All right, last call. Additional comments and questions. All right, then I'll see you all in 4 weeks.
All right, thanks, Matt.